Hey, Captain Morgan, we got a slight technical difficulty with one of our broadcasts.
We're going to run that again, ladies and gentlemen, and 3, 2, 1, here we go.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. We're down here at Las Vegas, Nevada Federal Courthouse again. Had a big day. We got a lot to tell you in a short time, but it was a long day today. First off, Ken Mettenbach gave you a little bit of an update at the noon break. But Ken Mettenbach was arrested this morning trying to come here to court to support the Patriots here, support these 6 defendants that are in court. He did have a hearing at 3 o'clock, a detention hearing in the same building. He is being detained. He is supposedly going to be transferred back to Oregon. It's a probation violation for squatting on BLM land is what they're saying. And it has nothing to do with this trial necessarily. It's just he likes to protest BLM property, and he was protesting on some BLM property back in Oregon, and he's found guilty here not too long ago, and he's on probation for that. So he was held, and he's not being able to go home from here, except he's going to be transferred back to Oregon with the U.S. Marshals. So that's kind of what we know of Ken Mettenbach. He's being taken out to Prump, is what we're told, and being held there. But Andrea has some updates for tomorrow.
Micah McGuire, who is in Tier 2, they will be the last ones going to trial later this year. He actually has a court appearance tomorrow to talk about, is it firing his lawyer?
He wants to go pro se. He's going to ask the judge to allow him to go pro se to represent himself in this case.
He's also going to try to fire his lawyer so that he doesn't get stuck with the lawyer that he doesn't like as his co-counsel like Todd Engel did. So at 10 o'clock tomorrow, it looks like both trials will be going, or both hearings will be going on at the same time. So we're going to be pulled in 2 different directions, but we're going to try to fill that room for him tomorrow at 10 o'clock.
8 o'clock tomorrow, we're getting back here again. We're starting a half hour early tomorrow. Sometimes it's 8:30, but tomorrow it's 8 o'clock. We'll be back down here again, finishing up with 3 more closing arguments with 3 final defendants. The government presented theirs today. Stephen Stewart presented their closing arguments. Eric Parker did his closing arguments, and Todd Engel did his closing arguments. As short as it was, he got 19 objections by the government during his closing arguments, and but he still did well. In the end of his closing arguments, we had a lot of tears throughout the courtroom. He did well representing himself as always. All 3 of these defendants and their attorneys did awesome today. So we'll let Andrea tell you a little bit about this in better notes.
So we started out the morning, the judge and Myrie are stopping the defense of some of the defendants. Scott Drexler cannot play videos in evidence to prove why he came to the ranch because he did not get on the stand to say that is why he came to the ranch, even though he talks about them in his longbow. So this is evidence that's already in evidence, and he can't bring it up in his closing statement because he did not take the stand. This goes back to show exactly what's been going on this entire time, that they're trying to prevent these guys from having their defense. They argued that Stewart couldn't use quotes from Susan B. Anthony, Benjamin Franklin, and the Ferguson protesters to show what some of his quotes on Facebook were like.
He wasn't allowed to bring that up because there was nothing in evidence that showed that he actually looked at those quotes. A quote from the 1700s that everyone learned in civics and U.S. history. Tanasi was not allowed to say that Steve Stewart saw those quotes and that was on his mind, and it was not admitted as a state of mind defense for Stephen Stewart because there was no evidence presented to the court that he actually saw the quote.
Then we go into the government's closing statements. Some of their statements, they used the barrel of a rifle to make federal law enforcement leave federal public lands 3 years ago today. Today is the anniversary of the Bundy Ranch. It did happen 3 years ago, and I think that there's no better day to have closing statements inside, and both sides use this to their advantage. They came from other states to join Cliven Bundy to assault, extort, and obstruct federal officers to release 400 head of cattle that were property of the federal government. They brought up many different Facebook posts, oiling bolts and loading magazines, not making signs to protest. argument today. He repeated things over and over again and repeatedly saying, and he brought a gun, not a sign, not a flag. So pretty much saying that they could not be protesters because they brought their gun.
One thing he said about that, he said some people come with signs and some people protest with guns. And this is what Eric Parker's attorney brought out very clearly. He says, not everybody brings a sign to a protest. Some people protest their Second Amendment with a gun, and they do it peacefully. And that's exactly what Eric Parker and these guys did.
They also showed the video, and this is the same video they took the screenshots of and tried to say this is Eric Parker pointing a weapon over the Jersey barrier, even though the video screenshots are from like a few seconds of video. They slowed it down and actually played it today, which was good. And he says, we dispute him pointing a weapon or not, but this is what law enforcement is seeing. Up and down, up and down. In a split second, they had to make a decision. Then he turns to the jury and says, use your common sense, ladies and gentlemen. When is the last time you saw something like that on the bridge? And showed a picture of Eric prone on the bridge. He's insulting the jury and saying that if they don't find them guilty, they are stupid. And they've been making these inferences the entire time. Then Dickerson goes through every count on the indictment, gives his opinion and how he has proven each count. So he's pretty much showing them and inferring that this is how you put them guilty. So basically there's no Second Amendment. If you brought a gun to the event to intimidate law enforcement officers, the gun does not need to be visible to the person there. Just having it with intent to intimidate is a crime. Then he says Parker and Stewart were prone on a bridge. There was an objection because Stewart was never prone on a bridge, and he goes, oh, you're right, Parker and Drexler were prone on a bridge, and Stewart was a spotter for Parker.
He gets to see this live.
This is all suggestive prosecution. They're literally going through the jury verdict form, and he is showing them how to fill it out, but he's also implying the guilt. So you find them guilty here, and then you have to see if they've brandished a weapon. And he's literally got the jury form in front of him with the little check boxes, and he is imaginary, like checking off the boxes and showing them how to prove they're guilty. So I thought that was going above and beyond, and it wasn't objected to. So I found that very interesting. When Tonasi got up for Stewart, he pulled up a meme that said he brought his gun to exercise his First Amendment with his second. He did so he would not be sprayed in the face with mace, just like this post. Dickerson has done a great job of weaving everyone together in a huge conspiracy and throwing it out at all of you, talking to the jury. It is your job to consider the facts and separate the people out as individuals, ensure that you believe that their individual guilt without a reasonable doubt. They talked about the First Amendment zone in the middle of the desert where people were being herdled like cattle. I thought that was very important.
And what he said about that, he said the First Amendment isn't in a box. The First Amendment is where your feet are at. So wherever you're standing is your First Amendment right. We're standing kind of in a First Amendment area, or an area here they're considered not First Amendment because this is federal property here. And they've been hassling us for the last 8 weeks up in this area. So he says it's not a First Amendment area like a box like at the Bundy Ranch. It's where your feet are at. That's where your First Amendment rights are.
He also said Stephen brought his gun so his family didn't have to make funeral plans, as they brought up the post of a Clark County official saying Bundy supporters better have funeral plans. He said no threats were made to assault an officer. He also said, where was Sheriff Gillespie and Tom Roberts? Of course, he wanted to say where was Dan Love as well, but we all know that that wasn't allowed in their closing statements. But we could have added that, and I hope the jury knew that. He also said here at this point, Stephen Stewart is spotting girls, not spotting people for Eric Parker. And that political pressure ended the operations, not what these guys did, and that the operations were ended on the 11th and not on the 12th. Then we had Marchese get up for Parker. He brought in Dave Bundy's arrest picture. He was arrested for taking pictures of snipers. He talked about Margaret getting thrown to the ground. The government says she was in front of trucks, but as you can see in this video, she was not. Ammon Bundy then came to the aid of his aunt, and he was tased and had attack dogs sicked on him. Talks about how Eric also saw the First Amendment zones, and he believes the First Amendment is not a zone, but a right. And if he is not secure in his rights, I am not secure in mine. He said they were hurting people, and I tell my kids that you have to stand up for your neighbor and stand up for each other. And if I didn't do that, I'd be a hypocrite.
Amen.
He had a gun, and that's just what guys from Idaho do, said Jess Marchese about Eric Parker. They talked about how the longbow producer, Charles Johnson, offered alcohol, but he says he offered alcohol and chips and M&Ms, but you don't see anyone eating chips or M&Ms on the videos. And that he kept trying to put words in people's mouths, furthering the narrative. He quoted, he acted like a used car salesman selling defective cars to senior citizens.
He said that. Did you hear that, Jason?
He talked about Flynn's video and the fact that Flynn was even saying that they said lethal force. He talked about the fact that Eric Parker did guard duty when he first got there, and he called them, they were pretty much parking attendants who greeted people and told them where to park. Talked about the BLM agents being up all night after hearing that dangerous individuals were coming to kill them. He also talked about Nevada Highway Patrol person that was given bad info and was told things that made him fear for his life so badly he had to call his wife and kids and drive over 100 miles per hour to get out to a wash that people weren't even in yet. He talked about the viral nature of the photos of Eric and the fact that many people who testified about the black hat with the white insignia made no mention of this in their reports. And also nothing about him pointing weapons until after they saw that video or the picture. He ended with, to believe in something and not to live it is to be dishonest. And that was the end of his closing statement. Todd Engel then got up and he started to go into his closing statement. He was badly objected on by the, how many times did you say?
19 times.
19 times, with only one time being overruled, right?
Yes.
Overruled and being allowed to continue that one time. What they kept saying is, he's testifying. They said, you've got to mention facts and evidence. You can't testify here. You've got to use facts and evidence. So saying words like I or I was or something like that, you have to say the video shows. You can't say I was.
Putting that narrative in there, the government done the same thing for over 4 hours a day. They put things that were not in evidence, speculation of what these guys were thinking and doing in their whole closing arguments today. But Todd wasn't allowed to do this.
Yes. He said that said in the evidence shows that I didn't go towards the bridge. I went towards Nevada Highway Patrol. That he showed up at 11:29 and for 20 minutes he was in the parking lot and wasn't doing anything until a lady said they were pointing guns at protesters. He said you could hear it in the Flynn video. Alex Ellis testified to it. Then he ran down the road to the bridge and saw what was going on. He had his camera. He didn't have his gun up. He had his camera and he was viewing what the BLM were doing. Then he says, from the aerial footage and the Shalakas footage, you can see I ran the other direction to Nevada Highway Patrol, where I spent the rest of the day with law enforcement. He ended his with, I don't know what more I could have done to help it end peacefully. He was the last person to give his closing statement by the end of the day today. So tomorrow morning we start at 8 o'clock in the morning, not 8:30, 8 o'clock in the morning. And we will hear from Scott Drexler, Ricky Loveling, Greg Burleson, and then the government will have a chance. Myrie himself will get up and do the end.
I think especially with what we saw with Todd today, he wasn't allowed to say, I drove to Bunkerville and I stopped at Mesquite at 8 a.m. and I stopped at the breakfast buffet. Objection. There's no evidence that you stopped at a breakfast buffet. The fact that he stopped at a breakfast buffet is immaterial to what they're trying to charge him with, but it's an intimidation tactic to take someone who is not an experienced attorney and to try to trip him up. Todd Engel today overcame a volley, 19 objections to what he had to say today. He did an excellent job, and he was able to go through every count on that indictment and say, they want to say I was in a conspiracy. I didn't know any of these people. They want to say that I intimidated or threatened anyone. I heard the word disperse, and I ran over to the police to say these guys are pointing guns at me. He said, I stayed there for an hour, and when I left, the guys that I talked to patted me on the back, and they said, thanks for your help. Todd Engel did an excellent job today. But the issue with the buffet and the other 19 objections, here's the 10,000-foot view of this entire trial. You cannot defend yourself. And the reason is because the government will come in and they will make it so that you cannot get your witnesses to introduce the evidence that you're going to need to defend yourself. Because you can't bring it up in your closing argument. You can't say this is why I did what I did unless it's been entered into evidence. It leaves a defendant with no choice, with one choice, which is to take the stand. Eric Parker was the only one to do it. It subjects a defendant to the risk of cross-examination. And the government wants it this way. They had 30 witnesses to start with, our defendants. They were down to 2 by the time it was done, and 1 defendant to testify for himself. And now the issue that we're having when we wrangle with the courts is that we cannot get the evidence that we need in to prove that these men are innocent because they weren't allowed to call any witnesses to bring it in front of the jury to begin with. And so the government is working as hard as it can to cripple their defense. Tanasi and Marchese for Stewart and Parker did a great job. I'm going to go as far as to say that Todd Engel drop-kicked the federal government today.
Yes.
I'm going to go as far as to say that because his plea to his innocence, it was passionate, and it was compelling, and it was heartfelt. And I think Todd Engel put himself in a great place today. And I want you guys to know this is not going to end tomorrow. These guys are going to be in Henderson for another week or so. I want you to stop right now, pay for a stamp, and write these guys a note. 49 cents to put something in the mail and write these guys a note. Let them know that you're thinking about them. Tell Todd what a great job he did. Tell Eric and Steve that you're praying for him and that you know that Scott and Ricky and Greg are going up next and that they're in your thoughts and your prayers because that means the world to them. They are literally on a cliff that's either the rest of their life or they go home to their families. They are in a situation that very few people have ever walked in their shoes. And today my challenge to you is get off the internet, get a piece of paper, and get something in the mail to these guys because they need every bit of it.
Hallelujah.
Awesome. Wow. We are definitely getting you in front of the camera more often.
Okay. I've got one more thing this Saturday, the 15th. I will be down at the West Las Vegas Public Library between 1 and 4 for a Freedom versus Government symposium. If you guys can join us, I will try to get this on the comments of everything. If you can join us, we would love to have you there.
We have several speakers going to be there.
Oh, yeah, John's going to be here.
We have some raffles going to be, and some things we're going to auction off. We have quite a few donated items that people have given us to auction off. If you have anything more, this support is going towards Roger Roots that has been faithfully helping some of the defendants here, and he's not getting paid for it. So he's living on total donations. So this is one of the things, but it's also to spread the information, spread the word about the political prisoners and different government tyranny that we're seeing here. And all these issues, multiple issues going to be talked about. The Social Security is going to be talked about, other issues. So please come out if you're near here. If you have any items you want to donate, please do that. But Saturday, April 15th, at about 1 o'clock at the West
Las Vegas Public Library.
Yes. So that's about all we have for you today. Be back down here tomorrow. We'll have another Jericho March at noon tomorrow. Hopefully we're out here, depending on court and closing arguments, what's happening up here. So we're not on a perfect time schedule because we're at the leisure of the judge and them. But we have 3 more defendants tomorrow with closing arguments, and then the government finishes up, and we're hoping this is over with tomorrow, but we do not know. We're hoping that the jurors get the case and start deliberating. But it could be next week. We have no clue or no idea at this point until tomorrow at some point.
I think that the reality that we could have 2 hearings going on at one time, if you're in the Las Vegas area or you can get here, dollars to donuts, Micah McGuire is not expecting anyone in that courtroom. This is a routine hearing for him to decide his counsel. I don't think he expects anyone to be there. I would love to pack that out. We can fit at least 24 people into that courtroom.
Absolutely.
36 or more into the other one. We got a lot of seats to fill. We need a lot of support.
So tomorrow's going to be another big day. We want more people.
Absolutely.
More people, yes.
If you are anywhere nearby and you can make it down here, we plead to you, if you have the ability, come and join us. And if not, keep us in your prayers.
So 8 o'clock for the biggest closing arguments. 10 o'clock for Micah McGuire.
It's courtroom 3B.
3B. So floor 3, B room, the room B. And then we're in the 7th floor. So those 2 courtrooms, if you can't be at one, come to the other. We need everyone's support down here. Could be the last day of court this week. We do not know if there's court Friday at this point, unless the jurors are deliberating Friday, but we do not know at this point. So thank you, and please come down here and join us.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks.